Hi, this is Owen O'Malley. You are watching GearWire.com, and we are at Infrasonic in LA with Infrasonic co-founder Pete Lyman.
All my converters are MyTech, so I have 9 channels of MyTechs, which sort of seems like overkill for a mastering studio.
Right.
But I run, the way my vinyl lathe works, I don't use a digital delay in the path at all. Okay. So a lot of times the way a lathe works is there's typically you send 2 signals to a vinyl lathe, and one is controlling the pitch and depth, so how fast and how deep you're cutting.
Right.
And then the other signal is going to actually going to modulation, going to the head, and that's being cut. The way they used to handle that, in the days of tape, there would be 2 heads on a tape machine, and one was offset. So the first head would go to the machinery that's actually operating the lathe, and the second one would be what you were recording.
I see.
So when digital recording sort of became the main format for mixes, the only way they could really handle it was to use a digital delay line. So technically, they're converting the signal from analog to digital and back to analog.
Right.
So there's at least one more conversion. So what I do, since 95% of the masters that we're doing are coming in on digital sources, in WaveLab allows me to offset. This is just some program material I have up right now that I'm working on for a master, but it allows me to run basically 4 channels out. So I'll run the program material out on one stereo set coming out of the MyTechs, and then I'll offset it by basically 1.8 seconds to another set. So there's no extra conversion. We're getting the lathe is getting what it needs,
Right.
and it's just a lot cleaner signal. And whenever we can, we're cutting from 24-bit as well.
Okay.
The highest resolution possible.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, this is a good opportunity, I think, to talk about the lathe.
The chassis is a 1956 Neumann AM32B.
And how did this come to be in your in your employ?
This belonged to my partner Richard Simpson.
Yeah.
So he's still cutting records. He doesn't cut a whole lot down here. He spent some time cutting at a record plant here in Southern California. But we've moved this over here, and since then it's just been constant state of restoration and upgrading things. It's kind of never ending, So and the lathe part is a AM32B. The electronics are the Neumann VG66 amplifier racks.
And so maintenance on these guys, is it like a Ford or is it like a Volkswagen?
It's like a Studebaker. I mean, there's a lot of problems, and when something comes up, you're manufacturing the part yourself most of the time, or scavenging. Fortunately, I have a whole other set of amplifier racks, so it's kind of like my Neumann junkyard. I can just if something happens, luckily I can usually salvage a part.
Right. Scavenge.
Exactly,
Yeah.
and my lathe tech is here in Culver City. His name's Len Horowitz, and he's, I'd be in big trouble without him.
Right.
So,
Cool.
we've sort of been this year, the end of last year, we recapped the system. We redesigned the pitch control on this system.
Redesigned it?
Yeah, we've recapped it. We've changed a few things on it, and Len's working right now on a slightly upgraded signal path design, and right now it's too complex for me to explain it because I don't fully grasp it.
Right.
But the pitch system will just be a lot more effective, and it'll save even more room on a lacquer. So you're just able to cut a longer side.
Right.
I mean, typically this pitch system is really effective, and where you find a really good pitch system coming in handy is when you're trying to cut like a 24 to 26 minute side.
Okay.
So that's where it starts to get kind of tricky.
Right. So other than, we've talked with other sort of like, lacquer mastering houses. So other than sort of, realizing that you have to, you're concerned about your bass frequency width, sort of determining your groove, I guess, density. Like, what else do you find that are limitations with a lacquer system, and what are sort of like the advantages that you can't get in other mediums?
Well, I think the limitations right now, in this age of digital recordings, you can put whatever you want as long as it fits between 20 hertz and 20 kilohertz. You can cram whatever you want onto a compact disc. Because of that, over the years, people are used to, like, if you've noticed, since the 80s, music has more and more high end. It's kind of crazy. So lathes weren't designed to handle all that high end. And basically what happens, there's a system that they use to be able to fit more space on the record. So there's an equalization curve called the RIAA curve. Okay. So basically, and this is extremely simplified, but it drops the low end and boosts the high end, because the low end is really what's taking up all that space on the record. Right. So your phono preamp is an exact reverse image of that, and the idea is that it's supposed to even it back out. I see. That's why you can't just plug a phono player into like whatever,
into like an aux or something.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh,
okay. So that's what's happening there. But what goes on is that when you're cutting, these high frequencies are exaggerated because of the RIAA curve, and so on playback, you might get distortion, aggravated high-end sibilance. All these issues are going to affect playback. Mm-hmm. So those are some of the things we have to struggle with, and then trying to get a good level on disc is tough when you have a lot of high-end content in the program material. So
what are the advantages? I mean, do you think
the advantage is that it sounds better? Yeah, I mean, if it's done right, it always sounds better. And I mean, of course, people are going to argue. I don't even really have any desire to get into that debate, but to me, it sounds better. And I think that there's something about the to me, I think a lot of it has to do with the way the lathe sounds. The cutting amplifiers are a huge part of it. It's just like that sort of like euphoric sound you get when you first, when you go from like, especially if you're a younger person, you go from only recording in Pro Tools, and then you finally hit tape, and you're like, man, you can't even explain it. It's like that's the sound that we.
It's like waking up in the Matrix.
Yeah, exactly. It's like everything sounded great before, but now it just sounds a little better. Yeah. and to me, that's what good vinyl should sound like.